Have some breaking news here on Ken Paxton's effort to have these Texas Democrats who are right now in Illinois arrested. Can you explain what just happened in court?
Yeah, Brian, it looks like Ken Paxton's plans have hit a roadblock. Those plans are to try to get Texas legislators back into the state of Texas so the Republicans there can gerrymander districts and basically try to guarantee that no Democrat can get elected in the state of Texas. So what did Ken Paxton do? He had the House of Representatives vote out this sort of Mickey Mouse civil warrant because these legislators had left their official Texas duties and gone to, among other places, the state of Illinois. So the House of Representatives filed a legal action in state court in Illinois saying, hey, Judge, whose name is Scott Larson, Judge Larson, we would like you to issue arrest warrants for these Texas state legislators that we would really like to haul back to the state of Texas. And Judge Larson looked at this filing and said, first of all, I don't have subject matter jurisdiction over this civil warrant that was issued by the Texas House of Representatives. And then he went on to say in a 4-page ruling, Brian, by the way, even if I did have subject matter jurisdiction, I think there may be a venue problem. I think there may be a problem on the underlying merits of this claim, and that's just for openers. So basically, no, denied, go away. I'm not going to issue arrest warrants for Illinois law enforcement officers to arrest Texas state legislators on a civil warrant that the Texas House of Representatives issued.
Glenn, does it betray kind of the desperation of these Texas Republicans or their lack of any credible path forward here that they had to resort to this absurd legal action, trying to get the House of Representatives already misguided effort to get Illinois judges to allow them to arrest Texas Democrats for something that isn't even a crime in the wrong venue?
Yeah, Brian, I think desperation is a good way to characterize it, and really poor lawyering by Attorney General Paxton. Let me just read a sentence or two from Judge Larson's rejection of what Texas and Ken Paxton were trying to do. He said, this court does not have the inherent power to direct Illinois law enforcement officers to execute a Texas civil warrant upon non-residents who are temporarily located in the state of Illinois. But then he goes one better. He says, well, further, this court notes that the warrant issued by the state of Texas House of Representatives is geographically limited, and it only applies whenever the Texas legislators may be found in the state of Texas. I mean, this is beyond laughable, and it's really beyond poor lawyering. I think desperation and folly are perhaps the best ways to characterize this.
Just a quick note for anybody who's watching right now, we're going to continue to keep on top of the legal updates here as it relates to Texas and the states that they have fled to break quorum, whether it's California or Illinois. If you're watching right now and you want to stay up to date on these stories, please make sure to subscribe to both of our channels. They're in the post description of this video. It's a great way to support our work and independent media more broadly, and it's completely free. Glenn, quick question on this. Can any state execute other states' civil laws like Texas is trying to do right now? Like, forget about the fact that this is just happening with regard to this specific issue, which already is not a crime. It is not a crime to be able to travel between states in the United States of America. If Texas legislators want to go from Texas to Illinois, they can. That's the beauty of traveling within the United States. It's still a free country, to the dismay of Donald Trump and these Republicans. But notwithstanding the baselessness of this claim, what about this idea of other states being able to uphold laws, civil laws, from different states?
Yeah, civil warrants and civil actions, think lawsuits between two private parties. Those kind of warrants generally don't have extra jurisdictional effect. In other words, one state is not going to be running around after civil litigants, who may have had some kind of a civil warrant put out for them by one state, lock them up and transport them to the state that wants them. Criminal warrants are a different matter. Usually criminal warrants do have extra jurisdictional effect. Why? Well, that makes sense. You don't want somebody to commit a crime in one state, be able to step over the state line and say,
Right.
nah, you can't get me now. Well, no, there are interstate compacts and agreements, and usually, the state law enforcement authorities and the state courts of all 50 states and the District of Columbia have agreements to make sure that, criminals can't get away with their crimes just because they cross state lines. But, civil warrants, particularly a warrant issued by the Texas House of Representatives, by the Republicans there, because, some of the Texas state legislators left and are avoiding, what they say are their legislative duties. So we're going to issue what feels like a political civil warrant. No, these things are not going to have interstate effect. Now, I don't suspect any Texas legislators, Democrats, are hiding out in red states. I think some have gone to New York, some to Illinois. But, there's no telling what a red state governor, DeSantis, as an example, he might be more than willing to kind of bend the laws or look the other way. But as of right now, I think it is very unlikely that there will be a legal vehicle anywhere in the United States that will end up with these Texas Democrats being taken into custody and transported back to Texas.
If Ken Paxton had a better avenue to move forward to retrieve these Texas Democrats, do you think that he would have put that forward? So what I'm basically trying to ask is this the best he's got, that he would actually engage in legal action here to try and compel an Illinois court to uphold a motion passed by the Texas state legislature? Like, he wouldn't do this if there was something better, if there was a better alternative for him to move forward, would he?
Not unless he's a complete idiot. We have a saying, put your best foot forward in court always. Yeah. That goes for the facts, that goes for the law, that goes for any constitutional arguments you might be making to a court. No, it's not like you start with an option that's a sure loser and then work your way up, unless that happens to be Ken Paxton's approach.
Right. With that said, is there any avenue for Ken Paxton to appeal, or do you think that this was because this was so summarily discarded, so easily rebuked by this judge in Illinois, that Ken Paxton is better off in this instance cutting his losses and just kind of stopping the embarrassment in his tracks, as opposed to going through another judge in the appeals process and another judge to the Illinois Supreme Court and just continuing to get the same answer over and over and over again?
I have a feeling, I am not privy to the ins and outs of the procedures and laws of the Illinois State Circuit Court, but I have a feeling when Judge Larson ruled that he has no subject matter jurisdiction over this, that may not even be an appealable ruling, though it may be under the rules, procedures, and laws of Illinois. But when he went on to say, you know what, this is just one issue on which you lose. There are 3 more waiting in the wings. You'd probably lose on those 2. That's my interpretation of what Judge Larson was suggesting when he said there are many other matters, personal jurisdiction, venue, the merits of the underlying matter that could also knock you out of the box. I think it's unlikely we would see an appeal filed. And if it was filed, I think it's even less likely it would be successful.
And finally, Glenn, in terms of the other actions that Greg Abbott, that John Cornyn, that the Speaker of the Texas State House are taking, are there any avenues that you are looking at that you think might be more legitimate than the avenues that Ken Paxton is taking here to try and compel the return of these Texas legislators at the hands of the Illinois court system?
I'm glad you phrased it more legitimate. More legitimate, no. More successful, here's my fear, Brian. Senator Cornyn asked the FBI to involve itself in a matter that it has no jurisdiction to enter. No federal crime was committed. No state crime was committed. The FBI has no business facilitating any kind of an investigation or possible return to Texas of these Texas state legislators. But my fear is, Kash Patel doesn't really seem to care that much about how the FBI goes about doing business. So, might he overstep his sort of jurisdictional bounds and get the FBI involved? I sure as hell hope not. That wouldn't be legitimate. But, with Kash Patel, Pam Bondi in Donald Trump's Department of Justice, never say never.
Is there recourse if they unconstitutionally, unlawfully, improperly deploy the FBI to be able to do business that the FBI has no business doing? Is there any recourse? Because, look, you had just mentioned that atop the FBI is Pam Bondi at the DOJ, atop her is Donald Trump. And so these folks are not going to offer to serve as some bulwark against FBI abuses. And so are the courts able to step in if there's some action taken to block the deployment of these FBI agents going from, to return these Texas Democrats from Illinois to back to their home state?
I don't know about blocking the deployment. So I don't think there's a suit that could be filed that would stop the FBI from, for example, sending agents from Washington, D.C. to Illinois. But here's the good news. If the federal authorities, the FBI, take somebody into custody in one state, the first thing they have to do is bring that person to the nearest federal magistrate for a hearing on the question of removal or extradition of that person from one jurisdiction to another, from one state to another. And I have to believe, unless there is some magic unicorn jurisdiction that I'm not aware of, man, any federal court judge or magistrate seeing that the FBI entered something it had no business and no jurisdiction to enter would not support an arrest, an extradition, a removal of a Texas legislator under those conditions.
Last question on the FBI. Because we know that it's an improper use of FBI resources to be able to retrieve Texas lawmakers who are committing no crime by virtue of leaving their state to go to a different state. It is not a crime. In fact, it's been upheld by even the Texas Supreme Court as a valid tool to be able to reach some political end. Because this would be an abuse of their power, is there any basis for an FBI agent to be able to refuse to obey an order for an illegal deployment?
Yeah, good question. So when we talk about disobeying illegal orders, we are typically talking about military orders. It is not so clear-cut in the civilian context, even if it's civilian law enforcement. But let me go right to the practical answer, Brian. I have to believe that with the mass firings of FBI agents and supervisory agents who have done nothing wrong, but work the cases they were assigned, they're being wrongfully terminated. I think the practical consequences of some FBI agent standing up and saying, no, I'm going to obey the law and my oath to the Constitution. I'm not going to do what a director of the FBI or a corrupt president of the United States wants me to do, tells me to do, or directs me to do. That person, I'm sure, would be instantly terminated, would probably have a legitimate wrongful termination suit. But I think that's really more of a practical matter than it is, the subtle, nuanced ins and outs of what an FBI agent can do if he or she is given a directive by a supervisor that they believe is unlawful, immoral, unconstitutional.
Well, we will continue to stay on top of this. I know that these Texas Republicans are trying to deploy every tool at their disposal to be able, whether legal or not, to be able to bring these Texas lawmakers back because they are just that desperate to abide by the whims of Donald Trump and consolidate power for themselves. For those who are watching, if you'd like to stay on top of this news, please make sure to subscribe. It is a great way to support our work. It is completely free, and it's the best way to show some support for independent media more broadly. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.